And
Are they,
Amalek.
are they, are the Amalekites terrorists?
So I'm not saying I don't want to be
Well,
simplistic, right? I don't want
yeah,
to be
but they,
oversimplifying things, but the for us, the archetypical bad character,
right.
the kind of culmination of everything that is struggling in order to kill us is Amalek.
Okay.
Okay, so at the beginning, by the way, it made it all the way to the International Court of Justice,
Wow.
and it's even calling it by that name is a little bit difficult for me. But anyway, they actually debated that question of Amalek because this is something that our prime minister and our back then minister of defense actually talked about. They said, um, like they talked about fighting Amalek. Okay, and this is why they accused. This is partly why they accused uh, Israel with genocidal intent, because in the context of Amalek, the Bible talks about wiping out Amalek. So they said if you refer to them as Amalek, even though the them was Hamas, it wasn't all the Palestinian people. If you refer to them, they kind of conflated the two intentionally. Then you have genocidal intent. But anyway, so that's how the question of Amalek and Hamas actually presented itself in the International Court of Justice. Unfortunately, they did not bring any Bible experts to talk about the subject. They only have legal experts. Okay, though I think the judge from Nigeria or wherever she was, I think she had a very important place for the Bible. Okay,
Uganda.
Uganda. You're right, Uganda. Um, yes, more so than Aharon Barak that we sent there. That's for sure. Anyway, let's start reading, guys. I'm a little bit under the weather with a bit of a cold, so you'll do most of the work, and I'll try to pitch in here and there. But you know, we have a lot of you, so let's start reading. And like every good origin story, we're starting with the beginning of Amalek. And let's read this, Ron.
Okay. Is that Vatimna Hayata? Is that
Filegish.
Philegesh? Le Lefa? Gain.
Ben.
Is that gain? Oh, sorry. Gain.
Ben.
Oh,
Ben.
Bain. I don't want to say gain. Bain. Bain Esau. Ben Esau. Vatelek. Le Elephas et Amalek. Amalek. Well, that's the word there. Amalek.
Amalek.
Okay. Ele Benai Ada Eshet Eshav Esav. Oh, the accents on the first syllable there.
Yeah, Esav. This is why I said Esav and not Esau.
Okay, Esav. That's what I thought. Okay.
Okay, in English,
right. Esav. Yeah.
We're used to Esau.
And Timnah. I'm sorry. Esau. Right. I saw the syllable the second. Okay. And Timnah was the concubine of Esau's son Eliphaz, and he bore Amalek to Eliphaz. These are the sons of Esau's wife Adah. You know, I find myself when I read this, even in church now when I'm preaching, I find myself starting to default to a Hebrew pronunciation of these words.
Good.
You know, I'm preaching from this month. I'm preaching from the book of Esther for obvious reasons.
Hopefully we'll get there today. If not today, the next week.
But I find myself calling him Akashveros.
Achashverosh.
Right.
You chose a Persian name to stick to the Hebrew pronunciation. So
yeah, go figure. But I can't help it now.
I think the Persian pronunciation
stuck that in my head there, huh?
I think the Persian pronunciation is Chashiyarsha, but whatever.
Yeah, I saw it in my text. I'm reading it as it's written there, so you know. But okay, you got that in my head now. I'm trying to see who often as I can use it.
Okay, so this is, one would think this would be the first mentioning of Amalek, but it's really not exactly the first mentioning of Amalek. Amalek, or the territory of Amalek, is mentioned a little bit earlier. It's also mentioned in the war of Abram and the kings, right? We remember the story of the 4 kings against the 5 kings, okay? And they strike the area of the territory of the Amalekite. However, it should be said that in the Bible, oftentimes an area may be referred to by a later name of that area, just for the reader. Okay, so if the story is written in a period where there is already an Amalekite, and we know where the territory of the Amalekites, it's like me talking about, let's say, the geological background of the continent of America, and talking about what happened in America 10,000 years ago before it was called America, but I'm still saying America, okay, because it wasn't, Amerigo Vespucci had not yet come to that place, but I would refer to it as the Americas or America, even though it's anachronistic. So we have reference to Amalek already in an earlier part of the book of Genesis. Okay, but it does not mean that the Amalekites are not descendant of this Amalek, who is the son or the grandson of Esau, okay, of this concubine. And already, okay, you can see that the Amalek, okay, is the descendants of Eliphaz, and in later post-biblical exegesis, they also make the connection between Amalek and Ishmael, okay, and they also put into that mix some ancestry in order to make the origins of Amalek even worse, okay? And they say that Timnah, okay, came to this is a post-biblical story by the rabbis. She came to Abraham, she came to Isaac, so they would accept her, let her join the family of Abraham and Isaac, and they rejected her. And to tell you that, you know, she was bent on joining that family, she said, you know, if you don't accept me, I will join the family somehow. So she went and was a concubine of Eliphaz, the son of Esau. That's according to the Babylonian Talmud. Now, it's not, I don't think that it should be read as historical. It should be read as talking about, you know, not rejecting people too harshly. That's the point. Because then she went, and of her you get Amalek. Okay, and Amalek is, as we said, like the paragon, the emblem of everything that is evil and everything that is against Israel. Okay, so that's a bit about the origins of Amalek. Okay, yes, Anne, I see your hand is up. Do you have a question about that?
Yeah, it says these are the sons of Esau's wife Ada. I mean, Ada is not the mother of Amalek, but obviously it is customary
Yes,
to
but she was the mother of Eliphaz. So we have Esau
that there is
and
the
Ada,
connection. Okay.
and then Eliphaz.
Yeah.
And Eliphaz has Timnah. Okay.
Okay.
And Amalek. Amalek.
Okay.
By the way, there is an area in the southern part of Israel called Timnah, where you have area where copper mines. Very interesting area. Yes, Betsy.
What is the connection to Ishmael here? Was Timnah a descendant of Ishmael? Is that what they're inferring?
Yes, but it's
Okay.
not like
I understand.
It's just
I just
to
wondered what
portray
they
Amalek as the refinement of the rivalry that exists between Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, Esau. Okay, that's a bit about the origins of Amalek. And now for the first fight between the Amalekites and the Israelites. I should say that we don't read this part this Shabbat. We read it on Purim. Okay, Ron mentioned that he is talking about the book of Esther, and the book of Esther is read on Purim. The Torah portion that is read on Purim are these verses. Okay, by the way, this is quite unique because whenever you read from the Torah in a public reading in a synagogue, the number of verses that you read must not be less than 10. We have one exception, and that is the reading of the story about the fight of Moses and Joshua and the people of Israel against the Amalekites on the day of Purim, where even though we bring out the Torah scroll and we read it publicly, we don't have 10 verses, we just have 9 verses. Okay? Because the whole story is a story of 9 verses. So that's quite an exception in regards to Jewish law, but it's not crucial if you don't remember that. So let's read these verses. Again, don't be shy. I want to see hands. I want to hear as many of you as possible. Don't be shy. 8 is a short verse, so I want someone whom I haven't heard for a while. Don't be shy. Short verse, guys. I don't want to call upon people here.
Okay.
Okay, John. Very good.
Amalek.
How are you preparing for our tour of the British Museum later on this month?
I'm Googling it as to where it is. That's a good start.
Come again?
I'm just working out in my head how to get there in time, because I have to come on the train, and then I'm going to, over the weekend, I shall have a good look at all the places, the parts of the museum that we're going to visit.
Okay. So we're gonna have a great time. I've actually made a handout that can serve you even if we don't get to all of the exhibits. People heard that I'm doing this, so many Israelis that live in London, they want to come as well.
Wow.
So initially I booked a group of 15 people. I think we're gonna go over that. But it's gonna be interesting and fun, I'm sure. So go ahead, verse 8.
Okay. Vayavo Amalek Vaylachem
Vailachem.
Vaylachem Israel be Rephidim.
Right. English.
Then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim.
Right. So the war against Amalek is happening in Rephidim, and it happens after the Exodus. Okay, so the idea of Amalek, the rabbis give a very interesting parable. The rabbis loved parables and stories as Jesus loved them in the New Testament, to tell a story and to try to make a point through that story. So the rabbis spoke of a cold, steaming hot bath, okay, scalding hot bath. Nobody dared getting into that scalding hot bath. Okay, but after the first person got in, burned as he was, it was already not as scalding hot. Okay, so this is how they viewed what the Amalekites did, because the people of Israel came out of Egypt, right? And they came out of Egypt miraculously. 10 plagues, the parting of the sea, the drowning of the Egyptians. And Yitro hears, Jethro hears about all of these things and says, now I know that your God, or the God, is greater than any other God. And he was a minister, a priest of foreign gods. He said, I know that the God is greater than any other God. And nonetheless, while the Amalekites knew that they're not going to win, they said, we're going to do it nonetheless. And you asked me about, comparison, about similarities. I don't know if they're maybe our enemies were so delusional to think that maybe they will do something and someone else will join, maybe. But the Amalekites were the ones who got into that scalding bath and, were able to bring the temperature down. Okay. And let's see verse 9. Go ahead, Bill.
Vayomer Moshe el Yehoshua Bechar Lanu Anashim Vetsei Hilakem Ba'amalek. Makar Anoki Nitzav al Rosh Hagiva Umate Ha Elohim Bayadi.
Right.
Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand.
Right. So there is something nice here about Bechar Lanu Anashim, choose for us. Kind of Moses working with Joshua, grooming him to be, at the end of the day, Joshua will be the one who will have to lead the people through the fighting to conquer the land. So you can already see that Moses is grooming him for that position. Okay, because the kind of leadership that would be required down the road when getting into the land requires leading the people in a conquest of a land, in fighting. And while miraculous, definitely at the beginning, it is not the miracle. Having God do miracles for you is not the best way that God wants you to live. Okay, if God wanted us to live according to miracles, we would be in kind of a world that doesn't have its rules. Okay, so there is a transition, and generally speaking, in the Bible in general, from more miraculous children like providence to a more advanced, less miraculous. Who is the model for the king of Israel?
David.
David. How many miracles David has?
None.
Okay.
Okay.
Can think of any.
Arguably none. Some could say, when you hear the sound at the top of the trees, then I'm not saying, but definitely not as many as Moses. Okay, and our archetype for a great king is David. So, and go out, fight the Amalekites. וצא הילחם בעמלק. מחר אנוכי ניצב. Note that the participle nitzav is in the context of tomorrow. So in English, you have I will station myself. But the Hebrew here just provides you with the context based on the adverb machal, tomorrow, and the participle nitzav, which could be now I am standing, or yesterday I was standing, or tomorrow I will be standing, or I will station myself. Okay, this is something that English does differently, as well as modern Hebrew. Modern Hebrew is more like English in many cases. For a modern Hebrew speaker, okay, that would not be the intuitive way of saying tomorrow I will station myself. But in biblical Hebrew, it is perfectly reasonable, because it's not a tense that indicates future, present, or past. It's a participle. Okay, more akin to the progressive. In this case, in English, you can have present progressive, future progressive, past progressive. Okay, and the fact that a verb is progressive or continuous is not indicative of the tense. The tense here is deducted by the context, where it says machal, tomorrow. Yes, Maureen.
My question is, which tribe did Joshua come from?
Ephraim.
Ephraim. Thank you.
Ephraim. It is said explicitly, Lemate Ephraim, Hoshea bin Nun. Okay, when the spies are sent by Moses to find out how is the land, or what is the land, how is the land like, it is said that the one who represents the tribe of Ephraim is Hoshea bin Nun, where Moses gives him his name, Yehoshua, which again, in many cases, we find biblical names with different versions. Okay? So for instance, the king of Judah, Achaz, in the writings of Tiglath-Pileser III that are found in I wouldn't say which museum, but you could guess, he is called Yehoachaz. Okay, so we find different versions of the same name. Some names even you can find several versions, like Chizkiah, King Hezekiah. It's called Chizkiah. Yechizkiah, like Hoshea and Yehoshua with a yod at the beginning. Or Yechizkiyahu. Okay? It's still the same person. It's a bit like Stephen, Stephan, Steve, Esteban. Okay? Different versions of the same thing. Umateha Elohim be'adi. Obviously, a verbless clause does not have the tense. So Mateha Elohim be'adi, the staff of God, in my hand, could be is in my hand, was in my hand, or will be in my hand. In the context of this verse, obviously will be in my hand, because we're talking about tomorrow. Okay, let's see the next verse, guys. Maureen, your hand is up, means you're reading. Oh, your hand is down. Frank, go ahead.
Yes, I will. Vayaz Yehoshua Ka'asher Amar Moshe Lehilachem.
כאשר אמר לו משה.
Oh, yes. Whoa, Moshe Lehilachem Ba'amalek Moshe Ha'aron Bechor Alu Rosh Hagiva.
Okay.
Yeah, and Joshua did as Moses told him and fought against Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill.
Right. So that's a miracle that he did as instructed. That's a miracle. Someone did as they were instructed. Right. ויעש יהושע כאשר אמר לו משה להילחם בעמלק, ומשה, אהרון וחור עלו ראש הגבעה. So they go to the top of the hill, and let's see what happens in verse 11, and we will talk about what's happening. Is it a miracle or what's yes, Anne, please go ahead.
Okay. So now, והיה כאשר ירים משה ידו וגבר ישראל, וכאשר יניח ביד וגבר עמלק.
וכאשר יניח ידו בגבר עמלק.
Yado, oh yeah. So it came about when Moses held his hand up that Israel prevailed, and when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed.
Right. What's happening here? Is it miraculous? So one could say, okay, one could say it is a miracle, okay? But the Mishnah talks about that. Yes, Ron, your hand is up. Your hand is up.
I'm sorry, I was volunteering to read, but she got ahead of me,
so you will read the next one.
the next. Okay.
But the Mishnah asks the question, וכי ידיו של משה עושות מלחמה או שוברות מלחמה? The Mishnah, and I think we've seen that Mishnah in the past, by the way, together in one of the occasions. The Mishnah asks about this verse. It quotes this verse in the tractate of Rosh Hashanah, okay? In the 3rd chapter, in the 8th verse, the Mishnah says, it quotes the verse and then asks, can the hand of Moses make or break the war? Literally. Make the war or break the war? Literally. Make or break? Yes, Jackie. Oh, you have to unmute.
I just wanted to read what's
Okay, so keep your hand up. You're in the reading list.
I just figured out how to make that go up. I've been trying to
Okay,
figure
very
it
good.
out.
Very good. So the Mishnah answers, it's not the hands, but as long as Moses held his hand upwards, okay, and the Israelites would look at him and hands look towards the heavens, they would submit their hearts to their heavenly Father. Again, we've talked about submission, we've talked about surrendering, not surrendering, okay? They would be stronger because they knew what they're fighting for. They knew their identity. And when his hands were down, which means they were not connected to God, they were not connected to those values, they would die, they would lose. Same thing the Mishnah says about the copper serpent, right? Again, the Mishnah says, you look at the serpent, you're healed. And the Mishnah says, does the serpent have the ability to cause death or life? No. But when the Israelites would look up to the standard and they again thought about God, they would hit.
Is that a way of praying?
Come again?
Is that a way of praying?
Looking up?
Yes, to pray, to lift up to God. Is that praying?
It is also, yeah. You can see that in Deuteronomy. Ki esal shamayim yadi. Okay, I lift my hands to heaven. So people today not as much, but you can see in the Bible it is a way to take an oath. It is the way to address God. Okay, to lift your hands upwards. That is to remember that there is something above. Okay, there is a beautiful melody for this Mishnah. Maybe by the end of today's lesson, maybe. Okay, so go ahead, Ron, 12.
Okay. That Yedeh Moshe, Kividim, Yedeh Moshe, Kividim, Vayek, is that Vayehu, Evan, Vayasimu, what's that?
Tachtav.
Taktan, that it? Taktan.
Tachtav.
Taktav, of at the end. Taktav. Vayeshev, Ale, Aharon, Vechur, Tam, is that Tamihu, Veyado, Mitzeh,
Veyadav,
Veyadav, Mitzeh, Echad, Mitzeh, Echad. Oh, Echad, I love that word, one. I'm not down yet. Let's see. Vayahi, Yadav, emunah ad bo hashamesh.
Hashamish. Again, in Arabic, indeed, shams. The sh at the end turns into an S sound.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Moses' hands were heavy. They then took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. Thus, his hands were steady until the sun set.
Right. So again, the hands of Moses were heavy. Naturally, is it? Some have suggested it's a criticism for Moses not to have led the war himself, but appoint someone else. Maybe. Okay. And they put a stone under him and it set upon it. Supported his hand. Mize echad umize echad. Okay, one from each side. Vahi yadav emunah ad ba'shamesh. So what is emunah? Here, the
trust.
So steady or fast, steadfast. The word emunah, we use it in every synagogue, in every church, every time we get there. Can I get an amen? Right? That's a emunah, right? Or every time we say a blessing, say a benediction, we answer amen.
Amen.
Right. What is amen? Amen has to do with something that is well supported. And obviously that very literal, concrete sense of something that is steadfast, strong, well substantiated, well supported. Even the supporting beams in a structure are called omenot. Okay, is related to the idea of faithfulness. So so we say emunah ve'emin b'Adonai vayachsheveh lo tzedakah, and he had faith in the Lord. Okay, so emunah is also faith. It's to be steadfast. His hands were steadfast, held strong until the end of the day, the whole day long. Generally, you don't fight at night. Okay, if you fight at night, that's the surprise. Okay, but a fight starts at quite until recently, and even today, one would say. So, emunah again connects us to the idea that this fight is also a fight of faith. Okay, so the word emunah, while literally it means they were held steadfast, it's also connected to the idea of raising one's hand and connecting the people to God. Okay, and a war that is not just a physical war, not just representing interests. By the way, part of the idea is that the Amalekites do not have any interest. This happens in the desert. It's not in the territory of the Amalekites. They come to meet Israel in the desert to soak in that scalding hot bath without any provocation. It's not the same like the people of Jericho trying to defend their city. Okay, it's a different thing. They come to fight with Israel. Vayavo Amalek. We started with the first verse, verse 8, and the Amalekites came. Okay, so that's the idea of emunah, both steadfast, literally, and in the mind and in the ear of anyone who heard biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew as well, in this case, even more in modern Hebrew. Because if you ask a modern Hebrew speaker, what is emunah? most of them have long forgotten the meaning, the essential meaning of strong, well-supported, steadfast. They will tell you emunah is faith, emunah is trust. Okay, related, by the way, to the word emet, truth. Okay, where the nun disappears, but it's the same root. And let's see, verse 13, Jackie.
Okay. Vayachalash Yehoshua et Amalek ve'et Amo lifnei Harev.
Okay.
Oh, the rest of it. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword.
So Vayachalosh, Chalash is weak. Vayachalosh, he made them weak. Okay. In modern Hebrew, by the way, this is a verb that is usually suggests overlooking somewhere, especially if you have advantage in like firepower over some place you are. That's the verb that is used. Okay, vayachalosh, he made them weak. Interestingly, he's not killing them all. At least it doesn't say that he's killing them all. Okay. And let's see the kind of epilogue of the story, of how we should remember that story. And let's see verse 14. Want to see some hands? Yes, Frank.
Okay. I have one question, if I may, about the
Sure.
previous verse. Well, at the time this is happening, actually. How old was Moses, do you think?
Moses, I can tell you exactly. I don't have to think.
Okay.
So Moses was 81 and 2 months and roughly 2 months.
Very good. So standing up, actually crawling up a mountain and then standing on top of the thing and holding his hands up in the air all day would be quite a task for him, don't you think?
For anyone, by the way, try to hold your hands 5 minutes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, okay, time to read.
No, the guys, I was just making the math there. Moses was 8 years when he stood before Pharaoh.
Right.
Right. Traditionally, it is said that it took them about a year of the 10 plagues and so forth. They live on Passover. Moses, according to the Jewish tradition. Do you know what's the birthday of Moses according to Jewish tradition?
The first of Nisan.
No.
Not the first of Nisan.
No, not the first of Nisan.
You have to tell us.
Yeah, don't know.
14th.
Would you believe if I tell you that it is today? Would you believe it if I tell you it's today or not? I have to know because
I will believe you because you're the authority, not I.
Okay,
Today is the
so-
first day of the rest of your life.
So according to Jewish tradition, the birthday and also the passing day of Moshe is the 8th day of Adar, 7th day of Adar. Okay, look it up, guys. Don't trust anyone. Trust no one. Trust but verify. So according to Jewish tradition, the birthday of Moses and the passing day of Moses is the 7th of Adar. You're more than welcome to check what's the Hebrew date for today. Oh, it depends. It really depends where you are, right? Right. Anyway, where I am, it's the 7th of Adar. And by the way, the 7th of Adar is a special holiday, you know, for who? In Jewish tradition, who's celebrating the 7th of Adar?
No.
Who's celebrating 7th of Adar?
Yeah, there is a group of people, okay, who are celebrating. Not first of all, they're not celebrating in the sense, but they're fasting, and then they're celebrating when they finish fasting. Okay, why?
Is this Lent you're talking about?
It is Lent. I have to think. Okay.
No, not Lent. In Jewish tradition, okay, people who are part of the funeral, okay, like morticians and undertakers, okay, their day is the 7th of Adar. Now that you know it's the birthday and the passing day of Moses, you can maybe guess why it would be the Undertaker's Day in Jewish tradition. You know why?
God buried him. God buried him in the
Exactly,
mountain.
Ron. Exactly. Very good. Very good. It was God who undertook Moses, who took care of Moses and buried him and took care of him. So they fast on the 7th day of Adar, and then they make a big celebration. Jewish undertakers in the birthday of Moses. So you asked how old was he, and this happens. You know, the Passover is about a month and a little bit more, and then you have about a month afterwards. You have that war. So that's 7th of Adar is today, and it's also the birthday of Moses. There you go. Again, I cannot avoid making the connection to the current events and to modern Israel culture. The 7th of Adar is also Memorial Day for soldiers whose place of falling is unknown. You know that there are in many military forces that sometimes you are unable to recover the body, and you don't know where they are. Okay, the place of the in many places you have the unnamed, the anonymous soldier, the unnamed soldier memorial, monuments, and so forth. So for those soldiers whose place of rest is unknown, the 7th of Adar is the Memorial Day, according to modern Israeli tradition, based on that tradition of the passing of Moses, and the 7th of Adar being the Undertaker's Day in Jewish tradition. And all of that is today. I wasn't planning on talking about that. And thank you for asking how old was he, so we actually made that point. Frank, you had it was God sent, right? This question.
I don't question it. I just try and do.
No. I'm saying, listen, guys. Unlike my fellow synagogue friends, who, when I speak on Shabbat, they don't have the advantage of going on their phone, because we don't use phones on Shabbat, and checking what I'm saying. So on Shabbat, in the synagogue, I can say whatever I want. No, I try not to abuse that. Don't worry.
Great responsibility.
Right. Great responsibility, sure. But you can all check what I'm saying. So that's 7th of Adar and its importance. Going back to 14, 15, 16, and then afterwards we'll go to the reading of Zachor, which is the reading that you all will hear in every synagogue where you come on Shabbat after the regular Torah portion. So let's see.
Ready for 14? Okay.
Go ahead, Frank.
Bayomer Adonai El Moshe Kito Zot Zikaron Basefer Besim, Be'azaneh, Yehoshua, Kimacho, Emche, Et Zeker, Amalek, Mitachat, Hashemayim. Okay, so, and the Lord said to Moses, write this in a book as a memorial, and I do have a question about that book, and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. What book?
Okay. It's a question. It's a good question. It doesn't have to be in a specific book, even though it has a definite article. Okay. And you can see the translation here, in a book. And that's not necessarily a bad translation, because sometimes the definite article is not systematically translated as the, okay, but rather in a book, zikaron b'sefer, in a form of a written text. Okay, not just talk about it, but actually write it.
So would this be something separate from a Torah scroll, for example?
For that, we have to ask, when was the Torah written? What was the original writing of the Torah? Was the whole Torah written by Moses, Genesis to Deuteronomy? It is nowhere said in the Torah that this was the Torah. Okay, that the whole thing, Genesis to Deuteronomy, was written by Moses. We do have Malachi saying, Zichru Torat Moshe Avdi, Asher Tziviti Oto Bechorev Chukim Umishpatim. Remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant, which I have commanded him in Chorev, Chukim Umishpatim. Statutes, laws, and statutes. Okay, so it's a good question. What was the Torah, and how did the Torah? Was it all originally together? Was it part by part? At which point these parts were collected into that collection that is called Torah? Okay, as we know it. So all of these are very, very interesting questions, which we're not going to discuss today.
Okay.
But it's part of the Torah. Yes, Ron.
Oh, it's going to be turn to read.
Okay, so macho emche. Here we have the tautological infinitive. Macho is the infinitive absolute. Emche is the yictol verb. So I shall certainly, I will utterly, okay, wipe out the memory of Amalek from underneath the heavens. Sure. Ron, go ahead.
Verse 15.
15, please.
Vayiven Moshe.
Vayiven Moshe.
Vayiven Moshe mitzbeach vayikra Shemo Adonai Nisi. And Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." Well, that's a short one.
Right. So interesting. The idea of naming altars. This is something that we find in other places as well, where we find in the Bible that an altar is given a name. And in this case, we have Moses calling it Adonai Nisi. And we have the calling of the name of the Lord in the context of altars by Abraham, by Isaac, by Jacob, who calls the altar El Elohei Yisrael. Okay, El, the God of Israel. Okay, this is something that is emblematic of what's happening here. Now, the word nes, there is a whole book about the word nes in the Bible and the perception of nes in the Bible. I actually had a student several years ago who wanted, he was in a quest of a spiritual quest, and he wanted someone to study with him personally. So he went to a rabbi. It didn't suffice him. It wasn't sufficient for him, the perception that the rabbi presented for him. He went to the Hebrew University. He said, give me a professor here that could teach me. And the professor he addressed in the Hebrew University was a professor of mine when I was a student there. She said, listen, I don't do that, but I'll send you to someone. That someone was yours truly. When we started studying together, he said to me, listen, I deal with Bitcoin. Do you want me to pay you with Bitcoin or with the regular money? I said to him, listen, I don't know what you do with your money, but I take my money to the grocery store and other places. I think I should have taken the Bitcoin when he said, but that's several years. And one of the subjects we've talked about was the perception of what is a nes, what is a miracle, what is the word nes, which literally means a standard, a banner. Okay, and the Lord is my banner. In the context of fighting a war, think about a standard or a banner. That would be, this is what we fight for. And it also connects to the hands that we've talked about, emunah, and to the fact that Moses is rising his hands. And the fact that we don't have that idol, okay? So it's a little bit more ethereal. It's a more ethereal culture than the cultures of the surrounding people.
Nathaniel?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was thinking that. That's what I put my hand back down. Was when I saw this, I suddenly realized that Moses is almost like a banner standing there holding his hands up, reminding about who God is, who God's power. And they could see that it's kind of it's not poetry, but it's almost like that, where it's a parallel statement almost.
So,
the Lord is my banner, remembering what Moses has just done.
I'm glad that we're coming to the same, view.
Yeah.
And I'm not forcing something, but you came to that realization because when you read this, when you pay attention to this, when you look at what the rabbis have said and how they read it in a similar way, even without saying these explicit words, they were very sensitive readers of the text, really, and they knew the Bible by heart, which helps. So they could make those comparisons, connections, right? Intertextuality. Okay. Yes. They didn't have to use AI. They had their own intelligence. They had the real thing, not the artificial.
Not artificial.
Yeah. Yes, Anne.
I wanted to read.
Go ahead.
ויאמר כי יד על כס יה מלחמה לאדוני בעמלק מדור דור. So, and he said, the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation.
Right. The hand, remember the hand that we've talked about, raising the hand, taking the oath, okay? Yad al kes ya. The hand is on the throne, okay? Here, Lord has sworn. That's a translation of putting the Lord's hand on, putting the hand on the throne is to take an oath, okay? So, the word kes, We know it also as kiseh. In Aramaic, kursa. They're all connected. Means that God is taking an oath that he has this war against the Amalekites for all eternity. Midor dor, generation, which means eternity or a very long time. And the idea is, again, the severity of what Amalek represents is because it represents that someone who is going the extra mile, in this case, many extra miles, to do the bad thing. It's not someone who is tempted, and we are all humans. None of us is perfect. We all have our shortcomings. Okay. I couldn't get the better of myself. Why did I say that thing to that person? It happens to me many times. I should have known better. I should have behaved better. No, this is someone who is doing the extra mile, who is going out of his way. All of these phrases that I'm using are literal in this case. They're going the extra mile. They're going out of their way to do the bad thing, to represent evil. Okay? And again, I'm not getting into the theology of it, but that's the idea. And I think it's also reflected in how this is viewed in the verses of Zachor that we are all going to read. I should say that because of the commandment that we should remember this, the reading of Parashat Zachor is considered to be a Torah obligation, what we call deoraita. Deoraita is Aramaic from the Torah. There are different levels of commandments. Some commandments are directly deduced from the Torah, and these are the most severe ones. Okay? And this is the reading of Zachor is one of them, according to some of the commentators. You already know that it's always a machaloket, right? But some of the commentators of Torah say they say that you have to go to the synagogue to listen to the reading of Zachor, while on a regular Shabbat you don't have. It's not your obligation, it's a public obligation that the Torah will be read, but you personally don't have to go. Okay? In the case of the reading of these verses from Deuteronomy 25, every year you must read or hear these verses. There are other opinions that it's not a Torah level obligation, and there are other ways to kind of fulfill that commandment even without coming. But generally speaking, that's a view that is held by many. Let's read these verses. Jackie, can you read aloud verse 17?
Yes. Zachor et asher asa lech Amalek bederech bitztechem mimitzrayim. Remember what Amalek did to you along the way when you came out from Egypt.
Right. Zachor, according to, first of all, what is the structure of this word? This is the infinitive absolute. Okay, the infinitive absolute serves several purposes in biblical Hebrew. Zachor, many examples would be shamor, haloch, lakoach, and so forth.
Imperative.
So it may serve as a general command. In this case, it's a command, right? Zachor, remember, you shall remember. In Jewish tradition, whenever you have this commandment of Zachor, it means that you have to say it, or at least hear it. It's not just remembering here, but it's saying or hearing, like the commandment to remember the Sabbath day. So we do what we call a kiddush. When Shabbat comes, you've seen it in popular culture, or you've seen it in a synagogue or in a house, that someone takes the cup of wine and say a blessing and that is related to the Shabbat. That is because it says that we have to remember the Sabbath day. So we have to say it or hear it. Okay, so the same goes for Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek. You should say or hear about what Amalek did to you. That's the active way of remembering according to Jewish tradition. Okay. Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek baderech b'tzetechem mitzrayim. Et, definite direct object marker. Asher asa lecha Amalek is opening a relative clause, that which Amalek did to you on the way when you went out of Egypt. We have the bet preposition on the way, baderech, and the bet here, bet zetechem mitzrayim, when you went out from Egypt. And you can see the bet here talking about the place, and the following bet is probably talking about the time. So you can see how the preposition can be used differently, the same preposition, just one next to the other, but used differently. Yes, Bill.
You need to unmute.
Bill?
Okay, just wanting to read.
Go ahead.
Okay, we're at 18, right?
Yes.
Asher kareka baderek veyazenev beka kol hanakashalim kareka ve'ata ayef veyagea velo Yarei Elohim. How he met you along the way and attacked among you all the stragglers at your rear. You were faint and weary, and he did not fear God.
Right. Asher karecha. Remember the story about the scalding bath that the rabbis told? Do you know what's the Hebrew word for cold? What's the Hebrew word for cold?
Mekurar.
Kar. Okay, yeah, mekurar. To have a cold. Mekurar is someone who has a cold. Cold in the sense of being cold, as opposed to hot, is kar. And the story about the scalding bath is based on that sound similarity of the word karecha baderech. Literally, the word karecha has to do with meet someone. To meet someone, like mikre, okay, vayiker, and so forth. But the rabbis have used that sound similarity between the root kof resh yod and kof resh resh, and said they have made you cold on the way. Obviously, yeah. So that's a very common thing in rabbinic exegesis, to use those kind of similar roots or similar sounding words to illustrate a point.
Would they use that in Yiddish to say to make someone cold in terms of killing someone?
Oh, no, I don't know. I don't know that. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
But here, the karcha is related to that parable of a scalding hot bath.
Well, that's the opposite then of cold.
Right. So they are the ones who made that scalding bath into a, that was Israel when they came out of Egypt. They're the first one who got into the bath. Thus, karicha baderech. And they went against those who were in the back. They are cowards, okay? They operated in a cowardly fashion. They went against the weak ones who were at the rear end. Okay? So again, that's fighting with those who cannot fight back. Yes, Frank.
Yes, that now, when they were attacking from the back, in some sense, they were behaving like predatory animals.
That is correct.
On the weak and
that's what animals do.
That's what animals do. Yes.
Right. And
But
it has a lot of sense when you talk about animals.
Yep.
Okay.
So they weren't being men. They were not being upright.
They were beings.
They were being animals.
Behaving like animals, right? You take, the animals prey on the weak, as we say, right?
In the animal world, they have a purpose, for keeping the herd strong. But
right,
they're doing it for a different reason.
Part of being human is to behave differently than, that we take care of the elderly and the weak and so forth. That's part of the difference between mankind or humankind and animals. Okay. Velo yare Elohim, here the beautiful ambiguity of biblical Hebrew. Who is not fearing God? Is it you? Is it them? Okay. Obviously, one would more easily read it as about Amalek, who were not God-fearing people. Okay, I'm just saying that the Hebrew itself does not have it doesn't say explicitly, okay, who is not fearing God. Okay, so this velo yare Elohim, Amalek was not afraid of God and did all of these things. Some of the commentators, in a less likely fashion, said because the people of Israel were not God-fearing enough, this happened to them. There are other issues there. Now, how this should be remembered. Monica, do you want to read?
Sure, thank you.
Sure.
V'chaya, v'chaniach Adonai Eloheiha Mikol is that an O? O.
Yeah, Mikol from all or from all.
Yes, but the next word.
Oyevecha.
Oyevecha. Misaviv. Be'aret אשר,
Ba'aretz, we have a kamat under the bed.
בארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך נחלה לרשתה תמחה את סהר עמלק מתחת השמיים לא תשכח. Therefore, it shall come about when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your surrounding enemies, in the land which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance to possess, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You must not forget.
Right. So there is a commandment to keep on the fight with Amalek and to annihilate and to wipe out the memory of Amalek. Why? Because of all of the elements that we've talked about. There is someone who is going towards you to kind of have a war that is not for a practical purpose, but for ideological purpose. If you go out of your way to do something that is not in your interest, it means that you have an ideology for it. It's not a question of convenience, but a question of ideology. And because it's a question of ideology, and it's the first one who is fighting Israel for ideological reasons, God says, you should do it. You should wipe their memory of anyone who is part of this ideological fight against you. Why? Even for the very practical purpose of, if it's ideology, it will resurface. Okay? So once you have gotten to your land and settled, and you've finished your other wars to get to the land, you should take care of that ideological enemy. You cannot say, unfortunately, as we said, we'll be roommates with the alligator, or with he will eat something else, no worries, Doesn't work. I'm not saying that, and I don't think the Bible and the Jewish tradition is calling for a genocide in the sense of the word genocide, but it is for the wiping out of that ideology as it is represented in that society at that time. So if you have a baby of the Amalekites who is growing up with a beautiful non-Amalekite family, you don't have to persecute them just because they were born with like Amalekite genetics. I don't see it, and I don't think in the Bible it is seen like that. Okay, but one could argue with me. This is how I understand it. Okay, I see that as long as there is an ideology in that group that is fighting Israel, and it's not dealt with, it will come to bite us in the ass. Sorry for my English. French in that case. It's, and that is the story that we see in 1 Samuel 15 and in the book of Esther, right? After in 1 Samuel 15, Samuel is failing to fulfill that commandment that we've talked about that is completely fighting with that ideological group and taking out anyone who is part of that ideological group, okay, then it comes back to haunt us in the book of Esther, because the one person who is spared is the king of Amalek, Agag. Okay, and we see it in verse 8. Okay, so I'll read some of these verses from the Haftarah for Parashat Zachor, not Shkalim as it is said, but Zachor. Ko amar Adonai Tzevaot. Thus says the Lord of hosts. Again, we're talking about a military context, so Lord of hosts is relevant. Pakadti et asher asa Amalek leIsrael. I'm now visiting. Okay, I'm remembering. I'm visiting. I'm punishing what Amalek did to Israel. Asher sam lo baderech ba'aloto miMitzrayim, which he had done to him, literally put to him on the way when he came out of Egypt, came up of Egypt. Ba'aloto miMitzrayim. We've talked about the different uses of the bet preposition. By the way, there are other uses. Ve'ata, or ata, literally now, contextually in the Bible many times. Therefore, like we have a preface, we have the next part, which is connected as a conclusion. Okay, I have visited, I will punish and visit upon them for what they have done. Now, as a result of the previous verse, Lech vehikita et Amalek, v'acharamtem et kol asher lo, ve'lo tachmol alav, vehemata mi'ish ad isha, me'olel ve'ad yonek, mishor ve'ad seh, migamal ve'ad chamor. You recognize the structure. Now go and strike the Amalekites and destroy, cherem, utterly destroy all that belongs to him, and you shall not have any compassion upon it. Vehemata, and you should put to death, mi'ish ve'ad isha, from man to woman, literally, contextually meaning everybody. Okay, that is merismus. Okay, you take two parts that somehow represents two parts or two edges, okay, either similar to one another or different, and they represent the whole. Me'olel ve'ad, from the young to the suckling, from the bull to the sheep, to the young sheep. Se, okay, from the camel to the donkey. Everybody. Okay. Now, why? Guys, again, if I were to talk about these verses a few years ago, maybe I wouldn't have had good examples. But unfortunately, unless there is a radical change that is done in someone who is growing up in a certain surrounding, unfortunately is bound to end up with that ideology. So you have to wipe out that ideology. Again, not individually, by the way, in my opinion, if this is not how I understand it, and I think I have a biblical support for that, but I don't think we'll get to it. We see that David does not kill all the Amalekites as well, and we hold that we don't have to do it today because that ideology specific in that people is not in existence. Yet the concept of fighting ideology of evil is something that is very present in our everyday life. Vayach Shaul et Amalek. So Shaul struck the Amalekites, the people of Amalek. Mechavila b'acha Shur asher al penei Mitzrayim. All the way from Chavila to Shur, which is upon Egypt, which is close to Egypt. But Vayitpos et Agag melech Amalek chai. You've noted that I've skipped several verses. Ve'et kol ha'am echerim lefi charev. And he killed the people. So, but Saul said, Vayachamol Shaul ve'ha'am. He had mercy. God told him, Lo tachmol. Al agag ve'al meitav hatzon ve'abakar ve'amishnim ve'al akarim ve'al kol hatov ve'lo avu acharimam. They, they said it's so good money. Why not take it? And v'chol ha'melacha nemivza v'names ota echerimu. And everything that wasn't of worth, they destroyed. Okay? And that is not what God told him. And so God says to Shmuel, to Samuel, Nichamti, I regret, I'm sad, I regret. Very interesting to try and understand theologically what it means for God to regret, to be angry, to be all of these. Obviously, I don't see it theologically as literally. Ki himlachti et Shaul lemelech. I regret that I've made Saul a king. Himlachti, I made king. You can see the root mem lamed chaf. Lemelech. In English, we try to avoid having the verb and the object similarly, right? I kinged Saul as a king. No, we would say I crowned Saul as a king, or I made Saul a king. Usually we'll try to avoid it. Okay, here you can see, I regret that I have made Saul a king. In the Hebrew, literally, I regret that if Nichamti means regret, by the way, that I have kinged Saul as a king. Why? Kishav ma'achara. You can see, by the way, the different uses of the word ki. The first one, ki, I regret that. The second one, because. The word ki has various different uses. Because he returned from following me. Ve'devarai lo hekim. And my words he did not make stand. He did not carry out. Literally, to make them stand. Vayichar leShmuel, vayizak el Adonai kol halayla. Samuel was angry and he cried out to the Lord the whole night. Okay? And Samuel says to Saul, listen, your disobedience, and we started about obeying or disobeying God and how Judaism is complicated. Sometimes you have to obey, and sometimes you have to debate, and it's hard to know when is when. Nobody says that, we have all the answer. Chatat kesem Mary. Rebellion is like sin of divination. Mary is rebellion. Ve'aven utrafim haftzar. Insubordination is like aven utrafim. Okay, this is a poetic verse. You can see, by the way, the structure of the parallelism. Chatat kesem Mary. Ve'aven utrafim haftzar. You can even see the kind of balance of the two parts. Okay, not just the synonymity of each part, but also the balance. Yan ma'as dever Adonai, you have rejected the word of the Lord. Vayima'ascha mimelech, so he rejected you from being a king. We have not read from the book of Esther. Maybe we'll keep it for next week. Yes, Anne?
Could you, is there a peaceful version of visiting Pachat?
פקד, yeah. ואדוני פקד את שרה כאשר אמר, ויעש אדוני לשרה כאשר
So it's the
דיבר.
context that makes it a retaliation.
Yes, yes. This is why I said that revisit or visit upon what they have done. So sometimes it